If you hit 6 on your keyboard, the texture for this hammer is going to pop up. If your hammer's just white, that problem is fixable. Hopefully, it shouldn't be white if you unzipped your file to the desktop and then opened the Maya file in Maya. It shouldn't be white. But if it is white, I can show you how to fix that. If you're in Maya, go over to Panels. There's like a sub-panel here. And go down to Panel. And then go to Hypershade. And this is mainly what we're going to be working in to like put textures and colors and stuff on 3D objects. When you're in Hypershade, there's a little ball called Lambert 2. If you double click on that, a window on the right is going to open, and then you'll see an option that says Color. There's a little triangle with a square, and if you left click on that, you should see a little folder, a little orange folder. If you click on that and navigate to your texture.psd and hit open, it should relink the file, and then you can go down here to the left hand side where it says for view or perspective, and just click one of those and it'll take you back to your 3D view.
And if that still doesn't freaking, even hitting 6 doesn't get your texture on there. Grab a keyboard from a
Yeah, just grab a keyboard from over here. One of the other students was having a problem in the back over here. One of these computers, whatever. Okay, if you hit Control A in your perspective view here, that window on the right, you can make that go, kind of get shorter or smaller. It basically gets small. That's just one way to kind of minimize that to give you more space. But essentially, just to give you kind of an idea of how you texture in Maya, if you go into Photoshop, this is the texture for this hammer broken down. And if you scroll to the bottom, there's a layer called Out UV. And if I drag that layer all the way to the top of my other layers, you'll see that it's like kind of outlines of like kind of, these are basically polygons. It's the outline of polygons. And I can go over to my opacity and crank that down to like 50. And if you see these polygons kind of fit over my texture here. And basically what I've done is I've basically told Maya to lay out these outlines of these polygons on a sheet, and then what I've done is in Photoshop you piece together a texture here in pieces and put them under those outlines, if that makes sense. So you can close this. We're going to make another one. And then go back into Maya. And go to Panels in Maya and go down to Layouts and do 2 panes side by side. I'll do that again. In Panels, go to Layouts, 2 panes side by side. And in the window that's not perspective, go to Panels, Panel, UV Texture Editor. And now this view is similar to any other Maya view. You can hold Alt, zoom out, and move it around. It's just another 2D view. And if you select your hammer in the other view, you'll notice that the texture pops up, and you'll see some of these outlines of the polygons. And you can select different parts of the hammer, and you'll notice that different parts pop up. Now the hammer's broken up into different objects, but like you could combine this, and it would, if you select the entire hammer, all of it shows up. So now I'm going to show you how to lay these out. So what I would do is go to Panels, Panel, UV, or go to Hypershade. And then double click on Lambert 2 and go over to where it says Color, and on the left hand side of Color, right click and go to Break Connection. And what that's going to do is break the connection of the texture to that shader, or that material. This is a material, this circle here. And then let's see. If you hit Control A, the window will go back to a small size, and then you can go back up to Panels in your left-hand side window, or whatever side your hyper shader is on, and go Panels, Panel, like for this one I want to go back to my perspective, so I'll just go Panels, Perspective, and then Persp. So then it takes me back to my perspective. But if you wanted to go, if you were on the other side and you wanted to go back to the UV editor, you go to Panels, Panel, UV Texture Editor. So now if I hit 6, you'll notice that the texture no longer comes up because that connection's been broken. So what we're going to do is we're going to lay out the top of the hammer first. And I've already kind of done this for this particular hammer, so I want to mess it up and start from scratch. So in the left-hand side, you'll see a little drop down. You want to drop that down to polygons. And this basically switches kind of the modes of Maya from whether you're doing animation or polygons or surfaces or dynamics, rendering, and some other stuff. But for now, we're going to do polygons. So switch it into polygons, and then go over to Create UVs at the top, and go down to Automatic Mapping. And that's just going to kind of break things up a little bit and make it to where we're going to have to redo it. So what I'm going to do to make this easy is if you select your hammer and you right click on it, your menu will come up, or right click and hold, your menu will come up here, and we've worked with some of this stuff on our 3D modeling: face, vertex, edge, and then object mode, of course. But there's another thing over here called UV, and if you click UVs, it's very similar to vertex. But what these are is kind of the outside of our. this is the texture information, essentially, or the, yeah, if that makes sense. And so when you're in your window over here, your UV texture editor window, these are the things that you're going to grab. If you can right click in here and also go UV, and these are the things you're going to grab in here to move around. And this stuff moves and rotates and scales just like in Maya. So for example, I'm in my window over here on the right, and I can right click on any piece and go UV, select it, hit W, E, and R, and that changes to my different move, scale, and rotate, and I can move this stuff around. So to make this easy, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, my 2D view over here in my UV editor, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go UV, and I'm going to select all this stuff in here, and I'm just going to move it out of my texture area, just off to the side, to make things easy. So this gray area here is our texture area. Anything outside of this dark gray is going to like overlap. Yes? Can you show them how to do that?
Mine didn't break the way you broke, so I was just keeping my flag.
Okay, I'll do this one more time here. If you got your window here, your 2D UV editor window, right click on a white line, go to UV, then just with your left mouse button drag a selector over all your pieces here, hit W on your keyboard, and then just move these off to the side. What's that?
The UV? Did I get it to UV?
It doesn't matter. Just move them anyway. We're gonna redo them.
What happens if they didn't break apart though? I come to that.
It doesn't matter. We're gonna redo them anyways. Okay, let's move on. So, you guys don't have to do this, but I'm just gonna pull up my hammer reference here. And if I look at this, I'm basically gonna try and break this up in my head of like what pieces are kind of the same and what pieces are different. If I look at this, the pieces with I have like the design over here, and realistically those are the only pieces that are really different, but I have some big faces here, like the top and the left hand side, which are kind of big faces where I want some of this detail. So I'll show you how to kind of break this up. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on my hammer here and go to face, and I'm going to hold shift and select these faces, and I'm leaving out these side faces over here because that's where I'm going to put the design. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go, once these are selected, I'm going to go up to Create UVs, Planar Mapping, Option Box. And I'm going to do this again after, so. And then basically if I look down here to in the left-hand side of my perspective view, you'll notice that you have your little axis thing that kind of moves around. This shows me which angle or which axes I want to project my UVs in. So X is, when I look at the X, a quick way to do this is, if you have your faces selected, just hit W, and you'll notice that the red arrow is kind of coming to and from. It's basically, that's the direction that I want to project, which is the front face direction. Yes?
Your planar mapper panel came from where?
If you go up to Create UVs
Sorry.
at the top, planar mapping option box. So anyway, so basically the red arrow is going to show me which way I want to project this, because it's facing that direction. So I look down here at my axis, and my axis says the red arrow is X. So I'm going to make sure that X is selected, and then I'm just going to go project. And once I hit that project button, you'll notice that it's basically taking a picture of this, essentially. And it's basically saying these faces right here are going to show up over here. And now you'll see that that part of it shows up over here. So now what I do is, in my UV texture editor, I right-click on the faces, and I go UV, and then I'm just going to left-click drag again and select all these UVs. Don't select the ones that you've pushed off to the side, just the one in your texture area. And then I'm going to hit R, and I'm just going to scale these down. And I'm going to try and keep, this has a very rectangular shape, so I'm just going to kind of keep it close, and then I'm going to move it up here to the corner.
Is there a reason you wouldn't scale it from the center just to keep it the same shape?
You could do that. I'm just, trying to speed it along, yeah. And I'm just going to move that up in the corner. I'll do this one more time. And actually do this with me, because we're going to do both sides at the same time now. So basically, I'm going to right-click on my hammer, go to Face. I'm going to select all these faces. And then this time, I'm going to spin around to the back and select the same faces. So we're going to do both faces at the same time. And the reason we're doing this is that when you texture something, you want to take up as little amount of texture space as possible in your texture space, so that you can incorporate as much detail into your texture. In areas that are much larger, like this hammer's huge, the face of this hammer's huge, so this is going to need to be a primary point of our texture here. So anyway, with all my faces selected, I'm going to go up to Create UVs, Planar Mapping option box. I'm going to select X. I'm not going to change anything, and hit Project. And now what this has done is it's done both sides, and it's put each side over one another. So I don't have two separate sides taking up a lot of texture space. I only need just this one. And I'm going to right-click on it, go to UV in my texture editor, select the faces, and then I'm just going to scale this and move it up to the left-hand corner.
After you click all the faces, you go back to UV and planar?
After you, what now?
After you get all the faces on both sides.
You go to Create UVs? Yeah, just click on Planar. Yeah. And then scale that, put it in the corner.
Did you grab the top two? Top as well when you did it, or just the two sides?
No, don't grab the top ones. Okay, so we should be pretty far along here. So now I'm going to do the top and the bottom, and I'm going to pretty much do exactly the same thing that I just did. I'm going to right click on my hammer, I'm going to go to face, I'm going to select the top face and then the bottom face because those are identical. Then I'm going to go over to create UV's planar mapping option box. This time I need to change the axis because it's no longer in the x-axis that I want to project. So the way I figure out the axis again is with my faces selected, I hit W, and you'll notice that the green arrow is pointing up and down. So that's the axis I want to project in. And I look down at my little axis key here, and it says that's Y. So I'm going to go over to Y, click that, and hit project. And you'll notice that that creates a projection on the top and bottom. So then I'm going to do the same thing that I just did. I'm going to go over to my UV texture editor window, right click, go to UV, select my UVs. I'm going to hit R, and I'm just going to scale this down and move it over into the right hand corner. And these are kind of a rectangular shape again, so I'm just going to kind of keep it similar. And we can actually put this under the other one and keep it kind of a similar shape and size as your other rectangle. You know, actually what might be a lot more efficient is if we took this rectangle and put it inside this other rectangle. Does everybody see what I'm doing there? And another way that you can get this really perfect, you'll notice that, you know, you want to like make sure that this is perfectly snapped in there and stuff. If you pull it out and you right click on this rectangle and go to UV and select an edge or select one UV, if you hit W on your keyboard to get it into move mode and hold V on the keyboard and left click drag, this will snap from UV to UV. And this is a way that you can get your UVs perfectly snapped on there. I'll show you guys how to do that again. So when you have your box, your one box out of there, and you want to snap them in, you right click on it and go to UV, select one UV, hit W to get it into move mode, then hold V on the keyboard and then drag that to whatever UV you want to snap it to. If you're lost at this point, I have no help. I can't help. What? You have two rectangles? No, don't click select.
I use some software, but
Okay, so let's move on. So now we're going to do the front and the back. Same sort of deal. Right click on your hammer, go to face, select the front face, and shift select the back face. With those selected, go to Create UVs, Planar Mapping option box. Now this axis is going to be different as well. And the way we figure that out, again, is with your faces selected, hit W. And if you look down, the blue arrow's in the direction we want to do it. If you look at your key, it says Z. So just select Z and hit project. Then I'm going to right-click in my UV texture editor, select UV, drag select my UVs here, and then hit R and scale this down. This one we're going to leave separate, so I'm going to stick it kind of, let's see, I'll stick it over here to the corner. And you want to kind of scale this one so that it's a similar size as your other one over here, so it kind of makes sense. Doesn't have to be 100% perfect, but just scale it and stick it over in the corner. So the last step in our hammer here, our hammer head, is to get the faces with the design. So if you look at this picture that I have, these faces all have the same design on them. So what that means is when I project those faces, I can literally do them all and overlap them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on my hammer head and I'm going to shift select all those faces and the ones in the back. And then I'm looking at my arrow here and it's telling me that Z is the axis I want to project this in. So I'm going to go to Create UVs, Planar Mapping option box. It's already at Z, and I'm just going to hit project. So then in my UV texture editor, I'm going to want to work, I need to do some kind of complicated stuff here, so I need more space to work in, so I'm going to hit spacebar and bring it up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on these and go UV, select all these, hit W, and I'm just going to move these out of my area for now. If you have accidentally unselected those, there's a quick way to reselect them again. You basically grab a UV of each one of these. Just shift select just one UV of each one of those. Shift select and then go up to select and then select shell. And what that's going to do is select every UV that's connected to that particular piece. And then you can drag them outside.
You wouldn't know. Help is mainstream.
there's a big square there. It's probably you accidentally unwrapped something.
This is a kid.
What you call it? UV unwrapped.
Alright, let's move on. So all these shapes, like I said, are the same, so we want to overlap them. So I'm going to grab one of these, this one on the left here. I'm just going to shift select all the edges. And when you select these, make sure you do a selection over them and not click them. Because if you notice, if you click one and then move it, it leaves one underneath. So drag and select. And there's a little icon up here on the left hand side that's like a little rotational thingy, and that's going to allow you to rotate this. If you click it once, it rotates at about 45 degrees, and if you click it again, it's going to rotate it 90 degrees. So then what we want to do is we want to move this guy over. We want to move them all on top of each other. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of move this one close, and then I'm going to select each edge and hold V and snap it perfectly to these other edges. So now I have one over the other.
Whoops.
And then I'm going to do this bottom one now, so I'm just going to select it and hold shift, select the other piece, and then with my rotation button I'm going to click that 4 times, and now it's rotated 180 degrees. So now I can move that up and then drag select and V snap these edges. And now I'll do the final piece the same way I did the others. I'll select all the UVs, click my arrow, rotate it a few times, and then V-snap the edges. So when that's done, I'm going to select this final piece and move it over and scale it down. R to scale, W to move. And then I'm just going to put this one, let's see, underneath this guy. And I don't make your edges touching. You don't want your UVs touching the gray, the dark gray border. Leave it kind of a little bit of space there, and also leave a little bit of space in between objects. So if you hit spacebar after you've moved that over, and you right click on your hammerhead and go to object mode, with that hammerhead selected, you'll notice now we've completely laid out our hammerhead. There's no other things there. So now let's take this into Photoshop and get a texture on here. So a quick way to do that is to, in your UV texture editor, go to polygons and go down to UV snapshot. And I'll hold that here for a while so you can see it. All the way at the bottom. And what this is going to do is take a picture of your UV view here, so that when you bring it into Photoshop, you can lay out your pretty picture that you're going to texture it with. So I'm going to change this size to 1024 by 1024. I mean, you're basically going to change this to whatever size your texture is. You can make it really big or really small. It just depends on what kind of a asset you're working on. I'm going to change the image format to Targa. You have to scroll down to get to it. And then lastly, where it says file name, I'm going to change this path to my desktop. And then down here in file name, I'm just going to call this OutUV. And then I'm going to hit save and OK. Here, I'll do that one more time. In your UV window, if you go to Polygons, UV Snapshot, when that comes up, change your size X and Y to 1024. You want to change the image format to Targa. You're going to have to scroll down to get to that option. And then in your file name, go to Browse. Go over here to where it says Folder Bookmarks. Click on Desktop. And then under File Name at the bottom, type in OutUV and hit Save. And then hit OK. What error is it giving you? Yes, make sure your hammerhead is selected when you do this.
Your hammerhead being in a perspective view?
What's that? Any view, doesn't matter. Make sure it's you're in object mode and it's selected. So in Maya, right-click on your hammerhead, go to object mode. When that's selected, then go to Polygons, UV Snapshot, and then put in your settings that I just told you about and hit save. And that should do it.
I mean, mine works, but
All object mode is just makes it to where you're in object mode, where you can select stuff. Nothing really. If that worked for you, great. Okay, so let's go into Photoshop now. And drag your OutUV TGA into Photoshop. And you can close out the other texture that was open before. If you drag it in, it's going to automatically create this image at 1024 by 1024, which is what we want. So now what we're going to do is throw some textures on this. So in my folder, there's a texture called brushmetal.jpg. Grab that and drag it in on top of this texture. And then what I'm going to do is go over to the right-hand side where it says opacity, and I'm going to crank that down to about 50%. And this is going to allow me to see kind of what's behind this thing. And then I'm just going to scale this down and move it over my top corner piece. And I'm only going to use about, I don't know, I'm going to use this same piece of texture for this other piece over here. So I'm trying to think a little ahead. So I'm only going to use about, I don't know, 1/4 of this texture or so. And then I'm just going to click the arrow in the corner and then hit place. And so I don't want this, I have some extra texture space over here, and I want to kind of trim this. So I'm going to right click on my brush metal layer and go rasterize layer. Then I'm going to click on my toolbar. There's a rectangular selection tool. And then I'm just going to go in here and trim off some of this excess texture. And try not to, you can leave it overlapping the edges. That's really what you want to do. You don't have to get super close or anything. And now I'm going to do the exact same thing for this other piece. So I'm going to grab the brush metal texture again out of my folder, drag it in. I'm going to go over to opacity. Drop that to 50. And I'm just going to move this one over to the corner. And this one I'm going to totally cover up all of my edges here. And just get it as close as possible. But don't cover the edges from the one below it. And then I'm just going to click my arrow and hit place. Now I'm going to shift select both my layers that I have dropped the opacity on, and then I'm going to crank the opacity back up to 100. And then I'm going to save this image as a PSD on my desktop. And I'm going to call it texture. So then when I go back into Maya, now I need to create a material that I can attach the texture to, that I can apply to this hammerhead. So the way you do that is I'm going to hit Control A, and that's going to minimize my window, bring up panels over here, and then my UV texture editor panel, I'm going to go Panels, Panel, Hypershade. And now I've got some materials created over here, but I want to make a new one. I want this hammerhead to be kind of shiny. So over here where it says blend, I'm going to click on this blend, and that's going to create a more shiny material, and that has what's called some specular on it, which is basically just shine is a good word to use.
Why not a fawn?
What's that?
Why not a fawn?
Fawn is more like a rubber shiny. So like now I'm going to double click on this blend, and color will pop up over here, and there's a little checkered box. Left click that, and a new window will pop up, and there's a little icon that says File. It's under Cloth. Click on that file, and then you'll notice on the right hand side there's a little file folder icon. Click on that, and then select your textured PSD from your desktop. And hit open. Now that texture is attached to this blend. Now we want to attach the blend to the hammerhead. So what I'm going to do is middle mouse drag this blend over to my hammerhead and let go. And if you're not in texture mode, you can hit 6 or 5 and switch back and forth from texture to shaded mode. And now you'll notice that we have a textured hammerhead.
You hold the mouse and spin it right or left.
Okay. Okay.
What's that?
I talked to him where he actually has the picture of the Photoshop thing, like all the little parts. Like everything else works except for the top. I don't understand how you get everything else. When you did the one
Okay, so now I want to show you guys how to add more to this. So let's go back in Photoshop and go into your folder, and there's this Norse symbol.tga. Grab that and drag it over into our image. And basically I'm just going to place this inside, do what we just did, but I'm going to put it kind of inside this last one that we have left. So just scale that down and stick it inside there. And now, I don't want this this white line and black and stuff anymore. So what I'm going to do this time is, in my layers, I'm just going to turn off the background layer. And then I'm just going to go File, Save. I'll work with you. Just hang. I'll work. Hold on a second. We're going to take a break and I'll talk to you later. Hold on a second. Okay, so then go back into Maya when that's placed and saved. And when you're in Maya, double click on your blend. And where it says color, there should be a little arrow box where the checkered box used to be. Click on that. And then there's a reload option. And if you click that, it should pop in.
Yeah, I did.
And if you'll notice that there's some white, like if you look at mine, there's some white areas. And that's because I didn't include some black under that. So all I'm going to do is go back into Photoshop, and I'm going to click on this background layer here, and I'm just going to make another layer below all the other layers, and I'm just going to fill that with black. So I'm just going to go over to my paint bucket tool, fill that with solid black, then resave my file, go back into Maya, and hit the reload button. And so now we have a design. So now let's move on and let's texture the rest of this. I'm going to show you how to do some different shapes now in Maya. I'm going to hit Control A, and that's going to make my window smaller on the right hand side. And then in my Hypershade window, I'm going to go Panels, down to Panel, and then back to my UV texture editor. And this is, what you're looking at right now is what I want this to be. But I'm going to show you how to get this. So I'm just going to go up to Create UVs, Automatic Mapping, and that's going to kind of break it up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this into two pieces. So I'm going to right-click on, or I'm just going to left-click on my object here, and I'm going to go to Create UVs, Cylindrical Mapping, option box. If you make sure you have your object selected, so right-click on it, go to Object Mode. And then basically what I'm going to do is just hit Project. And what this is going to do is it basically unwraps the whole thing around in a circle, if that makes sense. Just basically unwraps it. So I'm going to right-click on, in my UV texture editor, I'm going to right-click on this, select all the UVs, and then I'm just going to kind of move this up out of the way. And then now I'm going to right click on my object again, go into face mode, and I'm going to select all these faces on the top. And also the bottom. Shift select those. And I'm just going to hit 4 on my keyboard to look through here. And make sure that I have all my faces selected. Looks like I'm missing some faces. So what I need to do is I need to kind of go, I'm going to hit 5, and I'm going to zoom inside my object here. And I can actually see that there's some faces in here that I need to select. So I'm just going to shift select these as well.
Is that a planar projection?
Yeah, I'm going to do a planar projection like we did on the hammerhead. Another way that you can make this easy, I made this pretty hard on myself, is I'm going to right-click on my object here and go to Object Mode and select it. And then I'm going to go over to Show, do it again, Show, Isolate Select, View Selected. And what that's going to do is make it to where that's the only thing in the scene now. And now I can go back in and select my faces. if I want that to come back, I just go back to Show and go Isolate Select, and now uncheck View Selected, and now I have my faces selected. So with the top and bottom selected, I'm going to go to Create UVs Planar Mapping option box, and then I'm going to hit W, and the green arrow's going in the direction I want. I look down here at my key and it says Y, so I'm going to select Y and hit Project. So I'm going to go back into object mode, right click on your object, go to object mode, click it, and now you have these two pieces. So now what I want to do is move these in another area of the texture sheet. So with just that object selected, I'm going to right click and go UV, and I'm going to move this one, the circle below the dark gray area. And then in my 3D view, I'm going to shift select my hammer head, and now those UVs pop in. And now I'm just going to work exclusively in my UV texture editor window, and I'm just going to move these UVs and scale these UVs down. And like this circle, I'm going to put kind of in the center over here. And then my side wrap, I'm just going to stick this one under my Norris symbol thingy. So now, with that laid out, I'm just going to do another UV snapshot of this. So I'm just going to select just the hammerhead and the one piece, and I'm going to go Polygons, UV Snapshot, and all my settings should be saved here. And I'm just going to hit OK. Actually, they're not saved. Everything's saved but the location, so you have to go to Browse, and you can just save that on your desktop over the old Out UV, and hit OK. What's that? Select your hammerhead and shift select your other object so that just those UVs pop up, and go Polygons, Out, or UV Snapshot. And then the location is changed, so I'm just going to go to Browse and go to my desktop and save over that old one. Okay, so so now go back into Photoshop, and we have our background layer here that was our UV snapshot layer. I'm just going to trash that. And then I'm going to pull in my UV snapshot layer that I just saved. So I'm just going to drag that into Photoshop, into my image, and just hit OK. Hit the arrow, place it. And then this is made of that same material as this brushed metal. So I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm just going to grab the brushed metal, bring it in, and crank the opacity down. And I'm just going to move it. And I'm just going to kind of repeat the steps that I showed you how to do before. And just piece by piece put the brushed metal over these two new pieces. So I have a little bit of an issue here with a pre-existing texture. If you'll notice, my circle, my new circle that I've put in kind of overlaps this other piece of texture. So all I'm going to do is just grab the eraser and make sure your layer is rasterized. I'm just going to grab my eraser tool and just erase around that. Nothing serious. And then drag in another piece of brushed metal. And stick it over my circle. And then rasterize it. And this time I'm just going to use my eraser tool and just paint out the excess. So then I'm ready to save this and get it back in the scene. I'm going to turn off my out UV layer, so it's just the black and the textures. Save it. Go back into Maya. And now I need to reload my texture. So in my right hand view, I'm going to go Panels, Panel, Hypershade. Double click on my blend, click on the little arrow box to the right of color, and hit the reload button. Now when I hit 6, you'll notice that the texture is not applied to my other piece here, so I'm just going to middle mouse drag the blend over to my new piece. And now I have some stone, or brushed metal. On here. So I have a texture seam here. I don't know if you guys do on yours, probably, if you did it like me. If you'll see, I have a seam in my texture. And this happens sometimes. I want to try and fix that. So first of all, I need to figure out kind of where this is. So I'm going to hit Control A and make my window go smaller, so I can grab my panels at the top of my Hypershade window and go down to Panel, UV Texture Editor. And I'm going to select my object here. And I'm going to zoom in on the UV area where it wraps around, and I want to figure out where this seam is. So I'm going to right click on my object here, and I'm going to go UV, and I'm just going to drag select around these UVs, and I'm switching back and forth between wireframe mode by hitting 4. So I've selected the UVs now from that weird seam. I'm going to find out where those are. And if I look in my UV view, you'll notice that they're on the ends. So, and basically what that means is the reason there's a seam here is because these two ends line up, and the texture that's on this end is different than the textures than that's on this end. So I need to get those two to be the same. So what I'm going to do is just go back into Photoshop, and then I'm going to find the texture that's there. I'm going to turn on my UV layer again, and I'm just going to drop the opacity down to about 50. And I want to find the center of this mapping here. So I'm going to go to View, Rulers, and I'll turn on my rulers. And then on my left-hand side ruler, I'm going to left-click drag that ruler to the center of this thing. And it's snapping right now off center, so I get to turn off snap. So I'm going to go View, Snap, grab my arrow, and move that kind of pretty close to the center. So when I'm looking at this texture, I notice that there's this kind of big scratch on the stone, and that's kind of similar to some of the other areas. So that seems like the side I want to get rid of. So I'm just going to drag a selection tool over this piece. Actually, I'm going to turn snap back on, so I'm going to View, Snap, and then drag my selection tool, and that's going to snap to my ruler. And then I'm just going to go ahead and hit backspace and delete that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this piece over to the other side. So I'm going to right click on the layer, and go duplicate layer. I'm going to hit Control T and then right click on it and go flip horizontal. And then I'm just going to drag this. What you can do is you can hold Shift and just drag it over until it snaps to the ruler. And by holding Shift, that's going to keep it perfectly along that axis. So now I'm just going to click my arrow and hit apply. I'm going to grab this ruler, drag it off. Actually, it's called a guideline. And then I'm going to shift select both of my layers, turn the opacity back up, and now you'll notice that it looks like it's kind of centered. So if I were to save this image now, and well, turn off your out UV layer, then save the image, go back into Maya, and go to your, you want to reload this texture again, so go to Panels, Panel, Hypershade, double click on the blend, go to the color box with the little black arrow one, and scroll down to reload and click it. Now if you right click on your object, you'll notice that the seam is now gone. So that's one way to get rid of seams. So now you have a seamless brushed metal piece.